Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Hey everybody, John Peterson from John Peterson Photo here again. Here's my third video talking about this concept of light shaping. And really what this is using light and dark to add dimensionality to your image, direct the viewer's eyes, accentuate subjects. Really the use of tonalities in an image is one of the most critical things for you in the digital darkroom. And in the previous two videos, which I'll throw some links down below for you, I showed you a little bit of how I do it. In this video, I'm not going to talk or show much at all about how I do things, but I'll show you several examples of how I've used the manipulation of tones in the image to help accentuate or draw the viewer's eyes. So on the screen here, you'll see kind of one of the first images. And one of the things I didn't touch on in the first two videos was when you have a really high dynamic range image, lots of contrast, really dark darks, really bright lights. One of the things that I try to do is I'll try to even out the tonality a bit. So then I can layer in my creative tonal adjustments. So I'll work with both highlights and shadows to bring the contrast or the dynamic range a little narrower so that I have a more neutral palette to work on. Okay, does that make sense? I hope it does. And so like in this image, one of the first things I noticed was the sky is relatively well exposed and it's vibrant enough. But the key parts of interest in this image, the water motion and that finger of rock, are extremely dark. So one of the first things I did was I brightened up that foreground. Just that one change really helps balance out the tonality between the foreground and the background. Look at the foreground and look at the sky, and how the tonalities, the relative brightness of them is fairly equal. Without it, with it. Okay, real simple adjustments. And then I went on to go do a lot of color adjustments throughout the image. But we go from that to this. Let me turn all my layers back on. Hold on just a second. I had a bunch of layers in this. So, we go from this to that. Fairly muted to fairly vibrant. And it's really the core part of this image is right down here in the foreground. This is what I want people to look at. So I want to make sure that it's bright enough to grab and hold their attention. Remember that everybody looks at bright spots in an image. So having this be brighter really helps focus the attention down at the bottom of the frame. So let me move on to another shot here. This is another one over on the Oregon coast. This is the raw file. Really well exposed considering I'm shooting directly into the sun. And again, what's the main focus point? What's the main part of interest that I want the viewer to look at? Of course, it's this massive hole in the rock called Thor's Well. This part is of prime interest. And then secondly, notice the color in the light right down in here. This is an area that I also want to accentuate. And so for me, I use just a little bit of dodge and burn through this image to manage the light and manage the tonalities. Not a lot of color work. So my first one is just a dodge layer. And what did I do? I brightened up the water right here in the middle. And I did this slowly and subtly, just at 2 to 3% brush opacity, and gradually built up layers till I got the right brightness and tonality for this water. So it's bright enough so it holds you. Did a little bit of color work here, and then I also darkened up a little bit of the waves in the background and the clouds. Just a little bit of a layer a burning layer here on this cloud line on the horizon to help bring some dimensionality and depth to the image. Remember, our photographs are 2D, and what we're doing in these is depicting a 3D world. And so how we bring back depth and dimensionality is the use of darks and lights. And so by adding a little bit of darkness there in the background, it helps bring some visual weight back there. It doesn't distract the viewer, but that visual weight helps bring some depth to the image. Then the last thing I did on this particular image, look at how dark these rocks are. I mean, this is sort of kind of to be expected when you're shooting into the sun at sunset. These lava rocks are extremely dark. Dark objects also have an incredible amount of visual weight to them. And right now in this image, those rocks are a little too dark for me. I don't want them to be so dark and heavy in the image. So I did a little bit of work of brightening them up so they integrate better with the surf and the foam of the water surrounding them. So, you know, dark, heavy, solid, brighter, little bit less solid, little bit more integrated tonality wise with the rest of the image. So you can see I went from this to that, very subtle, but it's drawing the viewer's eye into the Thor's well right here and highlighting this part of the area, adding some depth and dimension into the clouds back here, and brightening up this tonality so it blends better and makes a more holistic image. Instead of having separate pieces of heavy rocks and bright white surf, I now feel like it's a more cohesive image. Now here's another image. I picked a lot of them from the Oregon coast. Here's another image that just wanted to touch on real quickly in this concept of light shaping. It's a real nice image. You know, I've got this piece here, I've got this, and then I've got the sun. I've got these three things lined up. Really draws the viewer's eyes out into the depth of the image. Notice the ridges of sand along here. If you wanted to make these a more prominent feature in your image, make it a compositional element. You know, what you can do is do a little dodge and burn again along the shadow side of these ridges. And I'm doing this, real quick and really sloppily to kind of show you what the effects can be to make these ridges more prominent. So by highlighting the shadow side, or by burning the shadow side, we create a little bit more feeling of depth in the image. So that's with the burn, that's without the burn. With it, without it. Personally, I like it without it. I like the subtlety of the ridges. I didn't want in this image to really accentuate these sand ridges. I just wanted them to be very subtle. This is about the driftwood, the rock, and the sun. And oh yeah, there happens to be some little sand ridges there. But that's just another example how you can shape some of the light to add some depth and dimensionality into your image. Another image here, this one is taken in Hood River Valley, looking at Mount Hood and one of the most famous barns out there. And again, it should be fairly evident where the viewer should look. But I really worked hard to shape the light in very subtle ways to have the viewer's eyes curve through the image. So here's the raw version of that image. The colors are a little bit muted. The light is fairly flat, which is great for me because then I can gradually add light back in. And what I want you to focus on when I toggle the layers back on again, look at the trees. Let's just look at the trees first. These trees are an important compositional element, and they're the lead-in into this image. I want them to start at the trees, go to the barn, and go back to the mountain. So when I toggle these back on again, notice how they brighten up. I want these trees to be brighter. I want these white blossoms to grab the viewer's eye and lead them to the red barn. Of course, I did some work on the red barn. you can see there. Fairly muted, but in this case I wanted it to pop. I wanted that red to really shine, and our eyes also will always look to red. Red's a very strong color for us. So in many ways, this red, the viewer will be fixated on this red bar, and it'll be hard for them to get past it because red is such a strong color for us in our brains. And then the last thing I did for all of these things is I added a vignette around the image. And what that does is it directs the viewer's eyes into the center of the image, or wherever I put the center of the vignette. One little thing I'll also show you in the next example is look for distractions that can take away the viewer's attention. These branches right up at the top of here, I didn't like them. I felt that they were distracting as I went through and processed the image. So what did I do? I got rid of them. Now this field in the background is fairly unbroken, which is great. So getting rid of specular highlights and distractions is another way, or another version of light shaping. So here's another example, again from the coast. I found this seal, mother and pup, at the beach, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that concept of removing bright objects. You know, as I said previously, our eyes will look towards bright objects. And so anytime there's bright spots in your image that's not related to your subject, it has the potential to take the viewer's attention away from your subject. Case in point, look down here at the rocks. There's some areas of these rocks that are virtually blown out. They're so bright, and they're just little, these are reflections, wet rocks that are reflecting, but they're very bright and blown out highlights. There's some down here in the lower right hand corner, there's some right here, there's even some on the back wall. And so what I will do as part of this light shaping, again, remember we are adding light, we're removing light, adding shadows, removing shadows. We're adjusting tonalities in the image to draw the viewer's eyes to where we want them to look. And so part of that does mean removing bright distractions. So I spent a lot of time on this image removing these bright distractions to end up with something like this. Notice that there's no more white spots on the back to drag your attention away. All those blown out areas in the rock are all gone. Let me toggle this on and off. I'll go back to this one, sorry. You can see these things down here, these things down here. And again, this image is fairly flat. So what I did do is I added some mid-tone contrast to help bring a little bit of that together. Got rid of those specular highlights is what I call them, and then I added a vignette. It's a fairly strong vignette, really darkens the edges of the image, but there's nothing else to look at other than the seals, and I wanted to use light to again narrow my viewer's attention span to just stay on the seals and not be distracted by anything else. So there's a quick little walkthrough of several different examples of how I use light shaping in my processing. Hope you found that helpful. If you want to see something more, something different, leave some comments below, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.